Yeah. So that was my whole rationale.
You might see my recycling.
That would be interesting to see who wants to be
I did get that
on the spot. My hope.
To order for USD 348 Board of Education. At this time, let's stand and sing, I was going to sing the national anthem. You want to sing the national anthem? The Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For our approval of our agenda, I move that we approve the agenda with the following amendment, and that is to add our educational program highlight to as number 7 under D recognition, which is an accidental omission.
Second.
All those in, oh, no, is there something else?
Actually, under administrative. Correct.
It's under it's under recognition usually.
Okay.
It usually is under recognition, but because it was under, this was under administrative reports, we did not purposely add it under recognition because we thought you were using it for both.
Got it.
They're two separate things. Okay, that's where the misunderstanding occurred. Got it. All right, that'll stand. We have a second from Phil. All those in favor of moving or adding educational program highlight under recognition and approving the agenda as presented, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Right, motion carries 6-0. At this time, I move we enter into executive session to discuss personnel matters pursuant to the exception for non-elected personnel under COMA, and the open meeting will resume here in the cafeteria at 6:45.
Second.
I heard Susan first. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0, executive session until 6:45. to discuss personnel matters pursuant to the non-elected personnel exception under COMA, and the open meeting will resume. 6:56.
Second.
Bill is seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Raise your right hand.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. 6:56, ladies.
I know where to find you now, thank you.
All right. Call the meeting back to order. Is there an approval for the consent agenda?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Chris has seconded. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, please say aye. Raise your right hand. Aye. Motion carries 6-0. Recognition time. We have lots of things to celebrate tonight. First up is Mr. Terry Jacobson. Hi, sir.
You want to stand up and we're going to talk about you real quick. He's loving this. He is accompanied tonight by his daughter, Kate Jacobson, who is many things to this district, including IC elementary music teacher, high school musical director. She also teaches guitar at the high school, many other classes, always doing a million things. And Mr. Jacobson, we're giving special recognition to tonight because he has been yes, come on forward. You're going to do the picture and the whole deal.
Do whatever you would do on my camera.
So Minister Jacobson has been a very devoted and dedicated, not just dad, but he's also been an incredibly generous donor to many of our arts programs in the district, from instruments in the classroom to supplies for the musical, and not just for 1 year, but for multiple years. He's done that every year, and this year he did even more than what he typically does. He helps with everything from programs to props to, the list goes on and on. If you came to the musical and you saw the programs, and the each program is beautiful, it's not cheap. And it's nice for our students to be able to have something that is so professional and not just a little one-pager, a good job on the musical. It looks like something that comes from a professional production because that's the intentionality around that. So on behalf of USD 348, the Baldwin City Board of Education supports and promotes excellence in all school activities. On this day, November 15th, 2021, the Board of Education recognizes and congratulates and thanks Terry Jacobson for, quote, downright amazing father and contributor to the USD 348 music program. Thank you, sir. Please join me. Okay, and at this time, I'm going to invite the BHS varsity volleyball team to come forward. Let's have everybody come up. I'm going to give the certificates to the coach. The Coach Ingman is going to pass those out, but while they're kind of getting in place, and I want you to talk about your season too, to whatever extent you'd like. So our volleyball team had an outstanding season this year, represented our school at the state volleyball tournament, resulting in a 4th place finish, which was very, very exciting. We're so proud of you. It was great. It was a great accomplishment. I don't know how many times on the way back from the state cross country meet, I was hearing your names, and you are, by the way, you're not Alyssa Reichert anymore. You are Alicia Richard. I don't know if you knew that or not. We were writing back, like, no, it's Alyssa Reichert, Alicia Richard. It's her alter ego. But anyway, we're so proud of you, girls. Coach, if you wouldn't mind, if you'd like to say a few words about your season, and then pass the certificates out, and then I will read one proclamation for all of you, okay?
All right.
Great. Want to answer the microphone?
Love
All right, well, this has just been an amazing year. It's been an amazing first year for me. Just getting to be around these lovely ladies every day has just been their leadership, their amazing, just awesome qualities that each of them possess. They come into the gym every day and just work so hard. Some of them just came from their club volleyball practice. just because they love the sport of volleyball and they put so much into it. So our season ended at 30 wins and 7 losses, which has just been a remarkable season. And I'm just so lucky to be surrounded by these ladies. So first is one of our seniors, Sophie Baker. A freshman, Claire Baker. Another freshman, Emily Paget. A sophomore, Avery Berman. One of our seniors, Maddie Wolford, she's not here, practicing for state cheer. A junior, Cheney Barth, she's at her club volleyball practice. A senior, Ellis Goby. A sophomore, Alyssa Riker. Another sophomore, Fisayo Afanja. Another sophomore, Reagan Bosch. A senior, Zoe Latessa. Another sophomore, Rylan Hilzer. And our 2 managers, Paige Soper and Harper Schondaler, are not here tonight.
Awesome. So, and I know that there were several individual records that were set this year too. Fisayo with blocking, Sophie hit 1,000 sets this year. That's a great milestone. There were a lot of awesome things that happened. A lot of all-league distinctions after, and I'm sure there's much more to come, but a 4th place finish to say congratulations on your entire season. The Baldwin City Board of Education of USD 348 supports and promotes excellence in all school activities. On this day, November 15th, the Board of Education recognizes and congratulates the Baldwin High School volleyball team. Congratulations. We had another girls team go to state. Coach Spielman, if you and your team could all come up. And is Caleb Carr here too? Caleb, you can go ahead and come up too. I'm going to wrap it up to you, Coach. Coach, if you could say a few words about the season and recap this team's performance at state.
Thank you. These ladies and gentlemen had a tremendous season. Going to state is always a great accomplishment for all the teams, and it's great that you get to do those things, but it's all the hard work and the camaraderie and all the other stuff that goes in behind it that you'll take and remember for a long time. And all these kids, plus the other ones, have just done a great job of putting that work in and that effort and helping each other out. That's gotten this far. And the ladies team, they were runner-up at league, runner-up at regionals, and runner-up at state. We tried to catch Eudora, but they just kept staying one step ahead of us all year. But they just did a great job, and we had 3 of them that were all state. Stuff that come out later on. They did a great job. Caleb qualified as an individual, and he just missed being all-state, top 20 or all-state. He was 24th and had just a tremendous race and just got better and better at the end of the year there. It was just a great job that they did, and we appreciate all the support that we get. There were a lot of people out there that came to the meets and all those things, and they notice it, and so they really appreciate all those things that everybody does for them. And I do too, and I appreciate all you guys' support. Thank you.
All right, I'll announce.
Here are the people that are here today and the other ones that are on the team. Lily Brooke-Eisen, Riley Smith, Diana Messick is not here. Jana Landreth is not here. Bailey Smith, there. Carly Kurtz is not here. Leonie Klingbeil is here, right here. Kaylee Griffith, and Abby Patterson. And that's for the ladies team, and then Caleb Carr for the boys team.
This day, we wish to recognize and congratulate the girls cross country team and Caleb Carr as the individual top member for the boys team. Congratulations on a great season and luck. All right, next we have the opportunity to recognize the Baldwin High School boys soccer team. So if you all would like to come up. Led by Coach McCune, Coach Cox, there. So I'm going to give them the certificates and invite Coach McCune to say a few words about the season, about the team. And we'll hand out the certificates to each one and then do the proclamation for everyone at the end. Thanks for being here tonight, you guys. You've come to all the board meetings, but it's fun.
First of all, thanks for having us in to be recognized. I thought last year's team was wonderful and with COVID situation. I didn't have that opportunity to come in, so this is great. We appreciate this opportunity. The three coaches, first of all, we got a third coach this year, which desperately needed. It looks like we have maybe half our team here. But the three coaches definitely very fortunate, very lucky to be coaching a great group of young men, and also to have the help of 5 amazing managers. This year, the managers were just superb. I'd like to really quick talk about just maybe the team. We won 12 games again. Played in our 4th straight regional championship game. The seniors who are leaving us, they've won 46 games in their career, which is about winning 70% of their games. They played in 4 regional championships, played in 2 state quarterfinals. They were a part of this year as well, an 18-game home unbeaten streak. We had a school record for 12 goals in 1 game. And in that game, 37 boys played. It was awesome. So I think that might be on record too. We started the year off June 1st. That's when soccer can actually start doing their summer practices, and the turnout for those was about 20 to 25 boys every single morning at 7 a.m. or 7:30, whenever we went, and it continued all through summer. I think that part of our chemistry sets in our drills and our activities we do throughout the summer. And one of the main things we did this year was have the opportunity to go to Minnesota. And you guys approved that as a board for us. And Caleb Carr, who is our leading scorer and our captain for next year, was all league this year and probably going to be all state. He was all state last year. Anyway, he's going to talk a little bit about how that just affected our team.
We put in a ton of work this summer, just getting into all morning practices, which I know is easy to get up in the morning. We did have a great time doing it. So this summer we did go to Minnesota, which was really fun. It was a great bonding experience for all of us. Getting to know a lot of the freshmen was a big part of that. Just them getting to know us and their personalities and how good they are, obviously. And then just thank you for approving that. It was a great start to our season. We really got us excited about the upcoming year, and it was a great experience. Thank you.
The Baldwin City Board of Education and USD 48 supports and promotes excellence in all school activities. On this day, November 15th, 2021, the Board of Education recognizes and congratulates the Baldwin High School soccer team. Great, great job. You make us very, very proud. And last but not least, stick around because we also have the opportunity to recognize our transportation team. Transportation Appreciation Day was actually in October. But the timing of it was kind of right after the board meeting, so we decided that November is a month of gratitude, and we could just keep that thank you party rolling into November. We don't take our bus drivers for granted. There's a lot of care that happens, little nuanced pieces of information that bus driver knows. And we're so lucky to have dedicated drivers who know if something's off. They know if a light is on that's not supposed to, they know all of these things, and they take it very seriously, and they are a very important part to the entire quality of the educational day, start and finish. So we wanted to take a special opportunity to thank them as well. I'm going to read off all of the names, and then Megan, could you help me pass out? And if you'd like to come forward, feel free to come forward. If you want to stay put, that's fine too. But our first, and then I'll read the proclamation. But the first person I'd like to thank is Gloria Thompson, Katie Gordon, Justin Strait, John Kramer, Darlene Schwartz, Charles Hornberger, Raymond Augustine, Kenneth Kern,
Thank you so much for everything at stake.
There he is. The pole kept me from seeing you. You're right there. There you are. I'm sorry. Linda Russell, Raymond Gostein, John Gostein, Naomi Burgess, Greg Wesley. Oh, he's right that way. There you go. He's right there. And coach drivers, we can't forget them because, boy, they got their CDLs and that helps a lot. We don't want to overlook that. Coach Bob Martin, Mike Spielman, Eric Tude, and then we have our driver and monitor appreciation for Diane Gish, Hilda Garcia, and Shirley Williams. So it takes the whole team, and we appreciate each of you. Chris, is there anything you'd like to come forward and say? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I also, all the other coaches got to say something. If you want to, you're more than welcome. That's okay too.
I just want to thank all the drivers for number one. We have drivers that have years of experience. They welcome, we have new drivers this year. They wrap their arms around the new drivers, taking them in, make them feel comfortable, welcome. Y'all answer all their questions. Our team, we don't break all the nails, we do great. So again, I think it's wonderful.
Well, we appreciate you. The Baldwin City Board of Education is and so on this day, November 15th, the Board of Education wants to recognize, congratulate, and thank our awesome transportation department. Thank you all very, very much. All right, thanks everyone for coming. We'll move on to the next part of our meeting, which is public comment. Oh, I'm sorry, you're right, the educational highlight. My apologies. The educational program highlight, Dr. Prairie.
Okay, this month we wanted to share with you a little bit more about project-based learning. So I know we've been here several times showing or telling you about it, but now we have a teacher team who can actually tell you what they've been doing. So this one is actually an environmental science class from the high school, collaborated with a primary center class. So Drew Ising and Aaron Scott are going to tell you a little bit about their project. Wonderful.
I told Ms. Scott I wouldn't embarrass her, so I came with more stuff now, which I wouldn't normally do. So board members, first, thank you very much for giving us a chance to share with you a bit about our project-based learning units from our classrooms. This project started with the students in my environmental science class at the high school. And so I gave them a task, especially after our meetings over the summer and last school year about the Prairie area. I gave them a task to monitor the progress of the prairie restoration. So how successful have we been to this point at making a prairie? Okay, so they were given a driving question from me. That driving question was, how can we as ecologists determine the progress of the prairie restoration area at USD 348? And so from that question, without any other real information, students were allowed to kind of brainstorm guiding questions that can help them get to that point, like how to get to the point of being able to answer that question. My students did a great job coming up with questions that included investigating how we could actually measure biodiversity. How could we compare our native prairies in the area to the restored prairie? And then any indicators of success, any other indicators of success as we went through there. Students spent several class periods. Our bus driver is gone, but we had almost the same bus driver every time. He was great. He jumped out there with us a couple of times as we went through it. And we used a quadrat-based system. So they had 50 centimeters on each side, PVC pipe square. And we took a random sample. So we just went out and identified 24 random places around the prairie area, put our quadrat down, and then we did stem counts. And if you've ever done a stem count, you can appreciate what the students got to go through. Some of those stems had like 500 or 600 plant stems inside the 1/4 square meter area. At first, they asked why we didn't use 1 square meter squares, and then they stopped asking that question pretty quickly. I was like, we certainly can. And then they were fine with the smaller size after that. They make these in smaller sizes, Mr. Isaac? Yes, they do. So during our investigation, we found over 50 different plant species just in our 24 samples. We ended up finding 73% of those as native species, which is a pretty good thing for as actively as it's managed. It's burned sporadically, it's mowed less often. There's not a lot of care that gets put into going out and removing things manually. So to have 73% native species is pretty good at that point. 62% grasses, 38% forbs, which includes your wildflowers, and then just a very few woody stems around the area. About the same time that our project was starting to wrap up the monitoring portion, I reached out to the 2nd grade teachers because they have similar standards that cover those ecological science practices. And Mrs. Scott was really excited to give her students a chance to do something similar. So my students worked with her students as kind of like a research partnership. We got to go out with a person from the University of Kansas KU field station. Sheena Parsons came out there and did a kind of a wildflower walk with the elementary school class and showed them some cool things that were around there. In between that wildflower walk and the students' research projects, Ms. Scott kind of went through the meat of the project-based learning unit after that introduction. It linked students' investigations back to what they were looking at kind of plant adaptations for spreading seeds, the needs of plants to grow in different environments and under different conditions. Her students did some cool investigations and experiments that supplemented our district's mystery science curriculum and the defined learning project-based learning framework that was in there, looking at investigations on, how do plants use light, how do plants use water to grow. And that was actually really great as we got the students back out into the field afterwards to look at these things. My students then were paired up with one of my students for every 2 of her students. And we made these neat little research teams, and they went out onto the Prairie area and did a version of what my students did. They were given a data table and a clipboard, and they were given a quadrat and a meter stick. And they went out and they took a sample, but instead of counting all of the stems, they counted the number of species, which is a little bit more age appropriate measurement for those students than being like, okay, count 400 grass stems. You're 7, it'll be fine. So they counted species, the number of species inside the square. And then to link it to their math unit, which at the time was measurements, we gave them a meter stick. They measured the grasses and the wildflowers in there. To link it to their ELA unit, we had them use adjectives to describe the plants. And my high school students just loved the chance to work with them and to come up with the best adjectives. So they weren't using the same adjective every time, and each one was really descriptive. Some of the students came up with like 4 or 5 adjectives for every plant, which was above and beyond what I expected them to do on that. And then we went back in. The students the next day with Ms. Scott and I now as their guides did the same investigation in the same size area in the lawn outside the class. And that allowed them to compare for the next kind of big science standard for them was to compare the biodiversity in different ecosystems. So we compared the lawn to the native prairie. How did the number of species differ when we look at these 2 places? And then their students graphed their results on number of species that we found. We found in their squares, we found 14 different wildflowers in the prairie area and 5 different grasses. In the lawn area, we found 3 different grasses and 5 different wildflowers in the lawn area. And so then they got to record short little videos with an app called Flipgrid that they were using to communicate back and forth with my students, since we didn't want to bring a bunch of high school kids into the elementary school to do that. So they communicated back and forth through Flipgrid. And then the elementary school students got to send their research summaries back to my high school kids with the video app the same way. And it was just really great to see them get to share not only their results, but then also they got to speculate on why the prairie and the lawn might have different numbers of species. Because if you were to look at any individual count, they had really similar numbers as far as species that you found. But we kept finding the same species in the lawn in every square, and every square in the prairie was a little bit different. The species weren't the same ones. I went back and identified the species by species for the students. We didn't make them identify the plants by species at that point. And so Ms. Scott's going to tell you a little bit about her students' experience and kind of how that went in her classroom.
Drew knew that I hate doing this, so he gave the big overview, and I'll just quickly give our side of things. It was a really great learning experience for all of them. But throughout the entire project, they're really actively engaged in their learning, asking a lot of questions and using those questions to find answers, and then really learning from each other. But as Mr. Ising mentioned, we spent a lot of time investigating plant adaptations at the beginning of this unit. And then one of my students' favorite investigations was growing a grass head. If you picture a chia pet, this is like a homemade chia pet. So we all made one of those, and it was really a good investigation because they learned the importance of sunlight to plants, which is collected by the leaves. And they made predictions about the direction that the grass will grow based on the orientation, so they could stand it up or lay it down. But at the end of the investigation, they got to give it a hairstyle and cut their hair. So that was really fun. But that activity was a really good segue to lead into the Prairie research project. As first and second graders, they really think of grass, our lawn, and the prairie as short grass and tall grass. So this really project, we could really go into depth and find out that it's not just short grass and tall grass, it's diverse plants, and they can learn about the adaptations of both habitats. But there's no way we could have done it without high schoolers, because like he said, identifying those, they don't know what they're looking for. So by putting them with those high schoolers, they knew what to find and how to find it. And it was just a really fun day watching those high schoolers really take over and be responsible for that job. And they just asked tons of questions, and they were just so engaged. It was really, really, really neat to see. But the funnest part was leading up to it, they just kept asking, when do we get to see the teenagers? When do we get to meet with the teenagers? Because they've never done stuff like that before. So they really loved it. I also really liked how we utilized Flipgrid. It allowed us to collaborate with them across the distance. Even though we only met with them for one day, we could keep working with them as a team. And then I also pulled some of the comments from my students to find out what they thought about it. And here's a few things that they said. One said, I felt like I was a real scientist because we were observing, investigating, and collecting data. And I love that she used those big words. It was pretty fun. Another said, I was surprised that some trees were found in those grassy habitats. Again, they picture a tree, really tall with lots of leaves, but really they learned that, well, a woody stem is considered a tree. So they found a few of those tree species in there. And then another said, I really liked it because we were with high schoolers and we got to share our knowledge with each other. So it was a good experience. I'd do it again next year. So thank you for your time.
So going forward, the collaboration was great, and I think my students and her students both really valued that. So we've talked about other science units that might align kind of with each other and other ways that we can keep them involved. And even if it's not that, I mean, my students, they just they thrived so much in that kind of mentor role, and you could see them. They're very different when they're given all of that initiative and given a little bit of charge over the situation. And it was really great to see that, where the students got to take on some leadership. And that's a thing that wouldn't have happened without us making a really intentional effort to do that through the project-based learning unit, right? And so that's something that's really great. My students also, as the kind of the next phase of our project, now that we have a baseline set of data, was to develop a management plan for the Prairie area. And so they got to research based on their management goals. And so some of them were thinking about how do we increase, the percent of grasses, because a native tall grass prairie 150 years ago would probably be 90 to 95% grass with little pops of wildflower mixed in. Some of them just wanted to increase biodiversity. How do we get more plants? One project wanted to look at how do we get more colors consistently throughout the year? Because it tends to be like early flowers are reds and oranges, and then it gets into the yellows, and then it gets your blues and purples. And they wanted to get more of that spread out more evenly, because they thought, for most people, they just want to see something really beautiful as they walk by. And if everything's one color or two colors, it's not as cool as if it's 5 or 6 or 7 colors as you're walking by it, which I thought was really interesting. And then I sent them into kind of the research to figure out, okay, if that's the goal, what do you have to do to manage to get that goal? And they wrote management plans that were then reviewed by Dr. Bill Busby, who some of you may know as a former board member, but he worked for KU as an ecologist. Dr. Gillian Gwynn was on our management team. Mr. Dorothy was on our management team. And then I brought back in Sheena Parsons from the KU field station, and she offered her experience as kind of a prescribed burn specialist for that university. And they reviewed the plans, and they picked a plan that we're going to then enact. So the next phase is for some students to contact the fire department and set up a late fall or early winter burn. They chose to do this because it will tend to favor biodiversity, but also it will prevent spread of non-native plants like teasel and Sericea lespedeza in that way. And then what they actually, which we thought was really interesting as a committee, was they set up more of an experiment with it. So half of it will be burned every other year or so, and half of it will be managed through mowing at the end of the summer growing season annually. And so we'll get to see, okay, which side, mowing or burning, does better, because the mowing will simulate grazing. And we thought that it might not get approved if we asked the city to let us put like some bison out there or sheep or something, for accuracy. But mowing does about the same thing. And so that was really great to see them kind of take that charge. And so their plan will be what my students next year, gosh willing, we'll get to monitor, and we'll get to see how successful was the management plan for this year. And so I hope next year to do a similar kind of idea for monitoring and management of a forested area in the Baldwin Woods that has been kind of set aside for my students to work in. And then the third year, we'll look at kind of a wetland area for restoration, and then we'll kind of repeat that every 3 years. Go back and revisit the plan and change it if we need to every 3 years in those different places. And hopefully after the burn and mowing, the Scotts students can go out there and help us make some cool observations about what we did. Okay, thank you again for your time, and thank you so much for your support of letting us provide these authentic experiences for our students.
Thank you all very much.
Did you have any questions? We have lots of pictures if you're interested in them.
I love the comment about, the student thinking of him or herself as a scientist. I mean, that's so important that they know what's possible for them. And also, for those of you who know my teaching style, I'm a big fan of the one-room schoolhouse approach because it's affinity-based, and it does provide for the enthusiasm of the young ones, but also the leadership opportunities for the teens. And you learn by teaching. It's a different way of engaging that's a win-win for everyone. So I hope that we can have, that's a great example that I hope that we can emulate and replicate throughout the district, because it works, and when it's done well, it serves all the ages, including the teachers. So thank you very much for presenting to us tonight. Yeah,
thank you so much.
All right, let's give them a round of applause. So it is recognition. Thank you. All right, now I'll move on to the public comment. I'm going to jump the gun and we'll go. We do not have anyone signed up for public comment tonight, and so we will move on to our financial report. Federal fiscal compliance policies. Steve Richardson is with us.
Yes, on the federal procurement policies, they have expanded greatly over what we had previously. And that makes sense because we're getting a lot more federal funds now. So a lot more attention has been given to those programs. And it just goes through and provides, by really broken down by dollar amount, the different processes that we need to be going through. And along with that, we do have a CPA audit going on right now. With that, they are doing single audit testing, which means they're picking a federal program. This year it was food service because that was the highest dollar amount for last fiscal year. This coming year, it will most likely be one of the ESSER funds. We are also included in the Douglas County single audit. So their CPA audit is picking up the Sparks money that was given to us. So we may be asked for testing and compliance along those lines as well. So we just need approval, or if you'd like to review this further and maybe approve it next month. The policy came from KESB. So two pages turned into 14 pages. Much more detailed.
I think that we approve federal fiscal compliance policies as presented.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye. Raise your hand. Aye. Motion carries 0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Administrative reports, academic update, the evolved screening data.
Okay, I shared a few slides with you. Those are available in the public section also, so anybody can go out and see those. But really, we just wanted to share a little bit of information from our fall screening and kind of what we're doing with that data that we have now. So with that, look at the slides here. Starting out, first we wanted to look at our student characteristics because we wanted to see, the state has been saying that characteristics, demographics of Kansas students are changing. Really, ours are kind of staying the same. So we're seeing about the same demographics right here in Baldwin. But one of the things, looking at that second little graph, our free and reduced lunch numbers for the past 6 years are kind of declining. But that big decline is actually happening, started in 2020. So, and that's also when the lunches and lunch and breakfast became free for students, the federal reimbursement program. So it could be that people are not filling out those applications because they don't need that as an incentive. So while that does look like it's dropping a little bit, I don't know that that need is not there. I just think the paperwork maybe is not being filled out. So I think that's one of the important things that we should probably keep an eye on in the future, just to see, does that raise, is that a perceived need? What's really going on with that number there? The next slide shows our reading and math data. This is the information that we sent out to families. This is kind of an overview of where our kids scored, the students that scored as on track in reading and math, and then those that need it were at some risk or a high risk. Overall, 67%, or 61% and 65%, sorry, my numbers are small on there. 61 and 65 are showing that they are on track in math and reading. So, or reading and math, that order. So that's actually, that was very relieving, I guess, when we look at those numbers to say, okay, we've got some work to do, but it's not the huge gaps that everyone says it is. But the next slide, I wanted to show that we actually started digging down into that, because while as a whole it looks okay, there are some areas that are concerning for us. And one of those bigger areas, on the reading one, would be first, second, and third grade in reading. And that's just, the numbers are a little bit lower than what we'd like there, the numbers of students that are on track. There's a greater number of at risk. That's kind of part of that kindergarten piece, when kindergartens had a disrupted kindergarten. And so this is impacting our first grade, and it's also impacting our second grade, because our second graders were in that 2020 year where they may not have finished kindergarten. So there's some things going on there that our teachers are working on. The other one is in math, and our math scores, a lot of our students are really showing on track in there. Fourth grade would be one of the areas we want to just make sure we're paying attention to. We don't show as many students on track there, but the ones that are at some risk really just need some fluency, some other procedural automaticity, some number sense. There's some things that teachers are particularly working on in that area, and they're not at a great risk. So we're actually kind of looking forward to what our winter data shows, because this is just our beginning data. This is our baseline. The next one, you have to bear with me while we geek out a little bit on some statistics stuff. So if you remember the normal curve that we have, teachers are saying, kids are all over the place, and we know, and we say, yeah, that's true. Here's some numbers behind that. So this is the standard deviation, and that's really the perceived ability estimates for students. And if we have a really low number, then they're really close to that center part. So that's our example there with the curve, really close to that center part, and they're more alike. So their ability levels are more alike. So a lot of times our whole group instruction is going to work, or maybe we've got one or two little groups that we're pulling. If the numbers are really large, we've got kids all over the place. We need differentiation for every single child in there. It's not like 3 groups are going to work. Every child needs something different. So a couple of examples I gave you are from second grade and 5th grade. In the second grade, if you look at math, it's about 13.39. That's probably about an average class, because you have a little bit of different abilities and things. But then you look at the reading scores, and it's 47.2. So those kids have a lot of variability in their skills. So teachers are planning lots of different activities, and that's what's going on in the classroom right now. The same thing's happening in 5th grade. Just another example there. Math is very similar, so they're probably able to do a lot of whole group instruction there. But then in reading, they're having to do a lot of different activities to meet the needs for all of their kiddos. And then what are we doing? So we're doing a lot of different activities. So it is taking a little while to get, plan for those activities, because teachers are really digging into their data. They're looking at, Fastbridge does a good job of predicting, saying, here's what the skills that kids need to work on. Here's a plan that you should be doing. Here's how you can monitor it and what measures you should be doing with those. So teachers are using that information, planning those activities, and doing those things with the kids. We're using those Fastbridge, the results, to target the support that we're providing for students. We're also doing some targeted professional development. So last week we had a reading specialist come in, and she worked just with 2nd grade and 5th grade. We're kind of trying to figure out how professional development can work, because we don't have a whole lot of professional development time, and we don't have a lot of subs in the district. But one thing that has been kind of successful is just pulling a small group at a time and just saying a half day, just intense, here's one thing we're going to work on. So we just worked on reading with 2nd grade and 5th grade. So she stayed in the district all day and I just made her switch buildings. So that worked really well. Kind of picked 2nd grade, looking at those scores. And then the other piece was 5th grade, yet a lot of the students in 5th grade need some phonics and phonemic awareness support. And they're a long ways from teaching that skill. So everyone was taught that in college, but if you haven't been practicing that and doing that with students, which our 5th grade teachers typically would not be doing, we need a kind of a refresher on what are those skills, how do we teach those skills? So that was kind of why we started with 2nd and 5th grade, and then we'll continue and pull her in when we need to for different supports for different groups of teachers. And then the next piece is once we come back from Thanksgiving break, then the winter screening period starts, and we're hoping to have winter screening wrapped up before the winter break. And then that January 4th PD day is when we'll be able to get back together, look at our results and kind of see where we need to group kids. Are the things that we've been doing working, or do we need to make adjustments to that plan that we're doing? So that's the plan moving forward. Questions?
Do you have other ideas about why the difference in math and reading? Why there's a difference between math and reading? Do you have any theories on that?
Not necessarily. Math just maybe more abstract. Maybe kids were just able to get it better.
I'm asking, is our Eureka math thing a little bit, there have been enough time since that was implemented to be seeing some of that?
Actually, yes.
I was,
Anecdotally,
because it seems, I know we would have years and years of data, just so I don't want to make a jump that isn't warranted, but are we seeing any, I know that was such a big change for us, and I was just wondering how that made you understand that same some of the numbers that we're seeing there.
So it was 2019, I believe, when we first switched to the Eureka Math program, which is a different approach to teaching math. And they didn't get through it all that first year as it was shut down. So last year we did get through it. Just anecdotally, teachers have said that the students were here, or that were here last year, seemed to be picking up on things a little bit better. So if there were some remote students, and it was more of a fact-based fluency program and not necessarily the deeper thinking that Eureka has and where we need to go with the state assessment pieces. So the understanding what you're doing. So yes, I believe it is making a difference with that.
Is the comfort level increasing with, compared to where we started?
200%. Yes, they are much more comfortable with it. It's totally making sense to teachers. They understand kind of why they're teaching it this way, why it's important for kids to have discussions about math and to understand what they're doing and not just know the formula to do something. So yes.
I would say the feedback, I mean, it was completely negative at the beginning, which I understand, we all do. But I would say I've actually had several people reach out and even like talking to the kids and like, I get why. Like, I'm not just memorizing it. I understand this, and then be excited about it. So, I mean, I've had more positive feedback than I did in 2019, but I didn't know if it was too early to be seeing any of that in our backslash data. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, I would say probably yes, that is a result of that.
Anybody else?
Is this based on benchmarks or the national ones?
This is based on benchmarks. Yes. Yes. So the 40% percentile and above, so at the benchmark, yes.
Thanks. We'll look forward to the winter battle. Thank you. I know there's a lot of work to do. We appreciate it.
Yes.
All right. Next up is our Kansas Association of School Board Superintendent search item. Dr. Brian Jordan is with us tonight. He's been with us all day. Maybe not us specifically, but he's been with the community of Baldwin all day. He's going to talk about the results of the, we reported the results of the online survey that we have put out to the district, and then also specifically various focus groups representing different stakeholders. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jordan. Thanks for joining us tonight.
You bet. Thanks for the opportunity to visit with you all this evening. So, as Kelly said, I was in the district pretty much all day. Got here about 9 o'clock this morning and then met with 7 groups throughout the day to collect their feedback related to characteristics and qualities that they think the board should consider as you look for your next superintendent. We also gave you in your packet there the information from the online survey that was conducted. It's in the blue folder. If you open that up, it's this document. You had about 345 responses on that online survey, which is, I got asked several times today, is that good or bad, or what do we know? I would say that's pretty average. 300 to 400 is pretty common for this size of district. As I told the groups that asked me about that, if there's a lot of turmoil going on with the direction of the district, we'll get a lot more feedback than that. So that could be a positive indicator that maybe things are headed to more of a calmer time ahead. Let's hope that's the direction that we're going. So I'm going to start off. Well, first off, let me talk through what we want to accomplish in this session this evening. I'm going to go through some of this data really kind of at a high level, and then walk the board through some of the same conversations that I had with the focus groups today to pin down what you believe are the priorities for consideration as you look for your next superintendent. The purpose behind doing that is that's going to help you as you begin to develop your interview framework. These are going to be the things that you're looking for as you develop those questions. And then also when you get down to the point where you're trying to make the decision, okay, who's the right fit? We hope that you pull these qualities back up. And I'll talk a little bit more about this in the next meeting, but we'll pull those qualities back up, and that allows you to then vet the candidates against criteria versus vetting the candidate against just their interview. So that's kind of the purpose of why we're doing this evening. So I'm going to start off and talk a little bit through the online survey, just real high level, give you a chance to kind of process what you're actually looking at as you go through that. There were 345 people that took the survey. That first graphic there just shows you a breakdown of who actually took the survey. Your largest group taking the survey out of the 345 were your parents and or guardians of your students in the district, with 175 individuals completing that. Obviously, it's just self-identified. There's no way that we can hold them to what they mark themselves as, but that was overwhelming, the largest group. If you go to page 2, this just breaks down how many years the individuals taking the survey have been connected to the district. We think that's an important thing to look at. If you have an overwhelming number of people that have been with the district, 5 to 20 years, there's a lot of history there. There's a lot of tradition there, and that you're going to see some things come up in qualities and characteristics that maybe point back to those traditions. If it's all relatively newer folks associated with your district, there may not be some of that history there. So that's why we always put that piece in there. And then as you flip over to page 3, this is where we start getting into ranking and prioritizing the different qualities. And so this first question is just ask the participants to rank the personal qualities of the next superintendent, with the highest priority obviously being number 1. So what you're looking at here is they rank them 1 to 8. How we arrived at these 8 qualities is over the years of doing these focus groups, pretty much land on common sets of characteristics on personal qualities as well as leadership, and that's where we came up with those. So as you look at this chart, number 1 priority from a personal quality standpoint is they want somebody that has personal strength to do what's right regardless of circumstances. Number 2 there is obviously kid first personality. If you look at the table below at the far right column, that's where I'm pulling those figures from. What we did there is just a sort, highest rated down to the lowest rated. So you might just make a note if there's things there that connect with some of the things you've thought about or feedback that you've heard from folks within the community. So then as you go to the next question, which is question number 4 on page 4 there, we're asking them to rank leadership qualities on this one. So really, what are those characteristics of a leader that we would like to see as the community rated them out? Proactive and forward thinking was the top priority there. Second highest was community oriented and involved within the community. I will point out that those were pretty high rated in our focus groups that we did today. So there was a lot of overlap there, which is a good thing. We would hope the people taking the survey have kind of the same sense as the people that we talked to in person today. If you all have questions, please just ask as I go through this. As we get over to question number 5, we're asking them to rank the experiences that they would like to see in the next superintendent. First priority there is experience with business and operations of a school district. We heard that today also, that folks told us that they want somebody that has they understand the finances of operating schools. That's typically a pretty high rated thing because the finances scare people. That's honestly, when we talk about education in Kansas, that typically rises pretty high on the list because of what we've been through over the last decade with school finance. And so that's kind of at the front of mind for people as they look at these things. The next thing there is curriculum and instruction leadership. So somebody that's got that, and then previous superintendent experience came in the top 3. Then this next page, starting on page 6, this is an open-ended question that we give the participants to list the single most critical issue they believe that the superintendent should understand about the district in order for them to have success. So when we do this in person, which I'll get to in a minute, we tell folks when somebody walks in on July 1, what are those things that they need to have on their radar and begin to address to have success here long-term as the superintendent. So obviously I'm not going to read through all 300, or actually there was 236 people that gave us an open-ended response. But some things that I was actually kind of surprised as I went through this. I figured we would have a lot of focus on what we've just been through over the last 2 years. And there really was some of that in there, but not an overwhelming majority of it was in there. There was a lot of comments related to we want our system to continue to prepare kids for their future and offering relevant educational opportunities. We want a leader that's engaged in our community out there, building those relationships in our community. Of course, budget always comes up in this. There were several comments related to mental health of students, some comments that connect back to some recent unfortunate events here in your community. So that was kind of a theme that emerged there as well. And like I said, you can read that on your own time, and that might help shape some of the questions that you decide to put into the interview framework when you get to that point. And then I'm going to jump over to page 14. So I'm not going to go through all the open-ended comments here. But on page 14, we asked them to rate out what single characteristic stands out or is the most, sorry, my pages are sticking. What single characteristic would separate a particular candidate from the rest of the applicants if you were selecting the next superintendent? So overwhelming on this one, number one from the list was honest and trustworthy, person with strong integrity. That also was a high priority today when we asked this similar question of the groups today. And it was almost double what the second one was. The second one was the kids first student-centered leader. And then the third one, it really dropped off after that. You get into single digits on the percentages of responses given for those. So your top 2 there were somebody that's trustworthy, strong integrity, and then kids first student-centered leader. Okay. So like I said, there was a lot of overlap from what we did with the online survey to what we did in person today. So if you pull out this other document, it just has a small chart on the front of it. That just shows you, the front page there is just showing you the groups that I met with, and then the number of participants that I met with in each of those groups. So the first group that I met with this morning was your primary group. We had 7 individuals there. Then I met with the intermediate group, which had 9. Junior high, we ended up with 5. High school, we had 7. Administrative team, we ended up with 9. I believe that was administrators and directors. And then I met with the district office staff. There were 3 of them. And then community members, we had 5 there at the end of the day. So a total of 45 people, which pretty standard, anywhere from 45 to 60 is kind of what I see when I do a whole day of these on-site focus groups. And again, it's really changed over the years of doing this. When we didn't have the online survey, we just did all the online or all the in-person focus groups. And so you were kind of hoping that you got enough people to have a good sample. But now that we have the online survey, what we do with the on-site is it validating what we heard in the online world? And there's a lot of overlap there as we start to go through these. So let's just quickly kind of go through there, and I'll kind of explain what we've heard as the most common themes. So on the first question, the question was describe the most important leadership and personal qualities, similar to what we asked in the online survey. As you look at this chart, you'll see the column there that says frequency. I met with 6 total groups today, and if there's a 6 in that column, that means 6 groups had that as a priority or something that came up in their conversation. So as you go down there, you can see some of those don't have any number out there in the left-hand side. That means it was a singleton group. So maybe one group mentioned that, no other group did. Not maybe, that's what it means. One group mentioned it and nobody else did. So as we look at most important leadership and personal qualities you would like to see in the new superintendent, every group mentioned that they want a leader that's being visible out in the schools, out in the classrooms, in the community, being present at those events. There was a term given there, see it, feel it, taste it. I thought was kind of a cool way to frame what they want in their leader from a personal and leadership quality. The second quality there gets into really more community engagement. We had 4 groups talk about we want a leader that's going to be out and engaged in the community. So there was some conversation here about it's a small community. They need to see this person, you know, at the different organizations and involved with the different events that are happening within the community. So really the difference between the first one there and the second one there is the first one is related to school and school activities. The second one is related to just the broader community as a whole. And then you have several that 4 groups had mentioned. So being a leader, first to make a decision, what's best for the district, make the difficult decisions. They mentioned that there's a lot of voices out there trying to influence the decisions that are being made. Just make the decision and stick with it. Next one down there is being available, being approachable. That's a quality that people really want to see. And then ethical and high integrity came up there. That was obviously a high priority in our other one on the online side as well. And then transparent was mentioned in 4 groups. So over half of the groups mentioned those qualities, and then you get into a cluster there of groups mentioning 3. And I will, in full disclosure, this was all put together just over the course of the day. So if there's grammatical errors in there, that's on me because I type as they talk. And so clean this up in basically the time from the last group until the board meeting here. So, but you can take a look down through those there, and I'll be happy to pause here and let you look down through that list and see if there's any questions that you have. I'll try to provide some context if something just on that first page, and then we'll go to the next ones, the next list there, if there's no questions. All right, so the next page then, if there's no questions on that first one, is the strengths and good points of your district the new superintendent will need to understand and support. So these are those things that as the new person walks in on July 1st, they may not have any exposure or experience with your district beyond the homework that they've done as they applied for the job. What are those things that make this a great place for kids to attend, great place for staff to work and families to live? So that's what this page is really trying to get at. So 5 groups mentioned that it's a community that's very tight-knit, very involved, feel like people have a good voice in the community. And there was always kind of a theme throughout the day-to-day that we've had a lot of community involvement over the last couple of years. Not all of it positive at times, but we've had a lot of involvement. People have had a voice and they viewed that as a positive. Connectedness to the resources, that's the second one there. Talked about the great relationships with Baker, the rec commission in the town. A lot of those great things that are right here in the community that make it a desirable job for an incoming superintendent. Then the next is the generosity of the community. They talked about the educational foundation and the support that comes from the community. Then we get into the great staff that's in place within the district, a lot of loyalty and longevity of the staff. And then the next one is nearby resources. This is really the proximity of the Baldwin city to other areas of the state. We talked about that in many groups today, that this isn't a desirable area of the state due to its proximity to Lawrence, Topeka, Kansas City, Ottawa. A lot of easy drives to a lot of different resources and jobs that are potentially out there. And then the next item that was also mentioned in 4 groups is there's a history and a strong reputation up here for academic performance as well as activities. I think you saw that tonight with your recognition, and I was driving down the street and your sign of all the accolades. There's a strong tradition here of success, and people want that to be championed for the next superintendent coming in. So I'll pause there, let you look down through that list, try to answer any questions that you might have as you skim down through there.
Brian, I did one question.
Mhm.
I don't know where I saw this over, but there didn't seem to be a strong inclination to hire somebody from within the district.
Right.
Or with experience being a teacher here or principal here, for instance. But then also kind of coupling that with the community wants the new superintendent to understand that the community is going into.
Right.
Am I misreading the situation? Like,
Yeah, there wasn't and we can talk about that as it didn't show up on the next question, which is critical issues, or even on the single issue at the very last. Sometimes we'll see people say, we want somebody from us or somebody that's been here. I didn't have that as a vibe in the conversations that we had today. Yep. The only real vibe that I got around that was there was kind of and it's kind of in there, I'll point it out specifically, but people talked about we deserve to have somebody that has some experience as a leader, and we as a community really shouldn't take a risk on somebody that hasn't had that district level leadership and experience as a superintendent. And how that came up is the question. I always let them ask me some questions at the end of the process. And I kind of explained to the groups that, a district of this size, this location, you're going to have superintendents coming from smaller districts that are looking for their next step in their career. Just like Mr. Dorothy came from South Lyon County, had experience, came here, so he kind of had gotten his legs under him as a leader in another district, and then was ready for that. Also talked about because of your location to the metro area and some of these larger communities, there's going to be assistant superintendents that are out there working in district level positions that are going to look for your job as well. So that's how that kind of came up. That people kind of came back and said, well, why would we look at somebody that doesn't have that experience? So, yep. So then the next question there is, this one always gets long, and no matter how hard I try to push people to pinch this one down, the critical issues list. So I frame this question around, I want you to think about that person walking in again on July 1st. What would be those critical issues that they would need to get their arms around as the superintendent begin to address to have success here long term, keep this being a great district? And so these were the items that the group came up with, or groups came up with. So you can see there, staff retention, recruitment, competitive wages was number one, came up in all 6 groups. And every place I've been in the last 2 years, that's usually in the top 1 or 2 because everybody's struggling with staffing. I'm not downplaying the importance of that. That's just a common thread that we're seeing in every search that we've run. People talked about facilities need to continue to focus on those, need to be spruced up a little bit, and so 4 groups talked about the facilities and those needs. We had 4 groups talk about the need for additional special education support and collaboration. There was a lot of discussion about the dynamics between the district along with the co-op and that relationship, and that needs to continue to be developed as a leader coming in. Just need to know you're part of that co-op. You're going to have to work on that relationship to get those supports for families and students. And then you get into a few items there that 3 groups talked about. Consistency in procedures and process, getting staff additional support really kind of tags into the tone of that conversation in most of the groups today was people are trying to do more with less, and more meaning that the needs have become greater as we've come back into the schools. We've seen an uptick in what our student needs look like. High expectations for all, be more hands-on with some of the challenges that our district leaders are facing, then mental health supports, and then we've got to rebuild relationships that have been strained or damaged given the last 18 months to 2 years. And those are really the ones that 3 groups or more talked about. So I'll let you look through that list. And I'll try to answer any questions that come up as I look down through this. And And this list actually flips over onto the next page. There's another 10 or 12 there on that next page. Okay, I think I'll flip over then to this last page, which is what single characteristic or quality will separate the best candidate from other highly qualified candidates who will apply for the position. Here again is where we had a lot of overlap with what we saw in the online survey. I think the top two in the online survey were honest and trustworthy. The second one there was a student first leader, and then another high one in the online was that personable and approachable. So top came up, and in this one, the numbers look a little different because I make every person that participated today give me their personal opinion on this one. So that's how come you can have 8 instead of 6 was the previous frequency number that we had on these. So we had 8 individuals say we want somebody personable, approachable, that's easy to communicate with. Second highest quality there was honesty and integrity. And then you can see a whole slew of items that 2 people mentioned as their top priorities. And then there's a whole list of singleton items there that people mentioned in the process. So now it's your turn as a board to have some conversation about these 4 areas of the information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be quiet for a couple of minutes and let you go back and go through these 4 areas. First one being personal leadership qualities, the second area being strengths, third area being critical issues, and then what's your single most important quality that you think is going to separate individuals from other highly qualified individuals. So I want you to go through and just jot down your top 2 on each of those areas, except for that last one. What's your top single quality that you think is the most important? And I'll be quiet, and then I'm going to walk you through sharing those, and I'll collect those, and then that kind of gives us what the top priorities are for the board based on some of the feedback that you've had a chance here to process this evening. So I'll be quiet for a couple of minutes while you kind of review that, look through that. Yeah, you can look at the online one too. Any of them that you want to access. I know this is a lot of information in a short period of time. But it'll give us a start to try to build that interview structure. So I'll be quiet and let you kind of review some of that. If you have questions, just shout them out. on the table and compile that to this. And if somebody like Tony, if you go after Kelly, if she took yours, just say, hey, I agree with what she said, here's my next one. And that allows me to kind of tally up the frequency of the qualities and characteristics. So Madam President, when you're ready, I'll start typing.
You want to start from left, right? Or you, okay. You're for that?
No, see, you can have all the right answers if you go first. I'm just saying.
Well, I can switch it. Like,
So there you go. That's good. That's good. That's good.
And can you start?
Really good leadership.
Yep.
qualities,
Yep.
right? It's not original based on what you're showing us, but I wrote integrity is my top.
Okay. Thank you.
I just had an understanding of I could get involved with small communities.
Therefore, I have to be involved.
I had outside of the box maybe. Visibility, schools and leadership.
The rank of the table on top, visibility in the school changes.
Yeah. Do we have any other on the personal or leadership qualities that were not mentioned? Here's what the list is. I have integrity. I understand being in a small community, you have to be involved. Outside of the box thinking, visibility in schools is important. Any of those that you have on that first one that were not mentioned? Okay.
Yeah, I mentioned compassion.
Okay. All right. Let's go then to the next one, which is the strengths and the good points. What's the top short list for you all?
I like the, I think it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 one down. Strong performance academically. The schools have a history of strong performance. I like that box for me.
Okay.
All of it.
I'm grabbing that and pasting here. Okay. You had that one also?
Focus on academic, but also achievement. And then also the strong connection. So mine is academic, but also the beyond the classroom learning opportunities. We have a really strong arts tradition in this community that is different than a lot of small towns of 5,000 people. And so understanding the variety of, in terms of the strength of our district, I think we have some multifaceted opportunities that are unique to a small town because of our proximity to other places. It's small, but we're not isolated.
I key on the commitment of school staff.
There's a theme in several of these that I'm not sure I'm articulating right, but the district has a lot of established partnerships. I listed out things like mental health, Parks and Rec, Baker. These are long-standing or very important partnerships that the district already has that I would like to see maintained going forward.
Can I mention that as well? This maybe is what you guys were talking. I just wrote the community values of the district.
Any others that were not mentioned in some capacity by the other board members? Okay, we'll go to critical needs.
I can start this.
Okay, Kelly, you start us off.
Just keep it fair. Rock, paper, scissors. Just kidding. I would say the most critical needs of our district right now will be how we support our staff and families, the fatigue. I see a lot of people just very angry, and not that their anger is not important, but I see how it's affecting students' ability to learn, parents' ability to engage respectfully at times, staff being very short-tempered at times too. It's just the human element of the fatigue. So I'm looking for someone who has a leadership quality to really empower and build people up through this adversity and come out better because of it. That's a lot of words, so I'm going to say empowered leadership through adversity as a way to sum it up. We'll toss it to John.
That was what I keyed on as well. I think we've got a great staff.
Can I do two? Just one now. Make the rules. All right. First one is talent retention. So retaining the amazing talent we currently have. Obviously, very concerned about that, as well as addressing the whole child needs, like academic, extracurricular, mental health, all those things.
I only had one, and it was everything Kelly said.
Okay, perfect.
Put me down for Kelly also.
Okay. Susan?
You can put me down for that also, and then also with the maintaining the bridges between what's been built between community mental health agencies and our schools, and that goes for students and staff.
Okay. Any final thoughts on that critical issues topic? Okay. Let's go to the final one, which is the separating quality that's most important for you as an individual. And I'll let you decide, Kelly, who gets to go, or I can pick something.
I'll go. Servant leadership. Okay. And this time I'm going to go to Susan. That was completely fair. Is that like truly a good person? How do you gauge that? I think integrity is kind of what everybody said, honesty, integrity.
Yep, Susan stole mine again. I was gonna say integrity.
So I think especially in these challenging times, communication is key. So I was focused on the phrase thoughtful.
I like all those qualities, and I'll add in the student-focused language as well.
Sounds like a cutout. I'm saying two things, but I was trying to mingle integrity and communication. A good listener can also say, I've heard all the individuals can activate this plan. Only we had a writer.
I just put good listener that processes the input and then acts accordingly. Is that enough of what you're close enough? Okay. Any other? I guess you've all given your one, so you don't get another one on those. You only get one. That's the fun part of that last question, because you can't just keep adding to the list on that one. So I will clean up some of the language on this because my typing is not good enough to make it perfect, and I'll get this to Megan tomorrow. Then the next steps for you all as a board. If you pull out this resource here, this is kind of our resource book. It has all the forms and everything in it. Inside of this book, if you flip over to page 35, you will see there is a bank of interview questions in here. These are meant to be pretty generic, but they are great prompts for your starting point for your interview questions. So typically what I tell boards to do to start to build their interview framework is, once you get this cleaned up list from me and Megan, go into this bank, and she'll have an electronic copy that she can just email the board. If you just go in and highlight what you think are your top 5, and if you want to wordsmith them a little bit, you can do that. But if each of you choose 5, there's guaranteed to be some overlap. When you go through an interview for a couple hours, you can realistically only get through about 15 to 20 questions. And so once Megan has those responses back from you, typically the clerk and president and I can make sure that those are all legal and written how you want. And then next time when I come back and meet with the board, you'll want to pull those out and make sure that the board is confident in what you're asking and aligns with what you want to get at during the process. So that's really kind of the next big thing for you. So be looking for this finalized list from me, as well as that electronic copy of the question bank. Again, just highlight your top 5 and send those back to Megan, and she can compile those. And then the 3 of us will work together, Kelly, to get that cleaned up. So that's one next step for you all. And then the other next step is if you flip over in this manual to page 26, it's really 27, 28. You'll need to finalize what you want the interview day to look like. So you'll see there on page 27 and 28, those are a couple example schedules of what the interview day typically looks like for a candidate. If you remember last time we visited, I talked about you'll want to only do 1 interview per day because you're going to be pretty worn out after a couple hours of sitting in an interview. And so that allows you to kind of reset, refocus for the next day when the next interview comes. So you'll want to finalize that interview schedule. And most commonly, the candidate comes in a community this size. The candidate's probably going to get to town probably mid-morning, kind of like that schedule that you see there on the left-hand side. Then they're going to take a tour of the facilities, probably do lunch with district office and administration team, and then complete their day with, if they haven't gotten through, a tour of the community yet, do a tour of the community. And then we encourage you, because we can again, try to have some opportunity where people can come and meet this person. So face-to-face, so do some type of an open house, kind of right as school's dismissing, in that window of time when school's dismissing, people are getting off work, have an opportunity for people to come see who this person is, look them in the eyes, talk to them a little bit. That's not another interview. It's just an opportunity for people to come and meet this individual. We have had boards ask, well, how do we get feedback from people when they meet the person? A real simple little trick that a lot of districts have started doing is anybody that shows up at that event, they just hand them a note card that says perceived strengths, questions, and then they just drop it in a basket when they walk out. And then at the end of the day, you guys collect that and you have a nice little snapshot of what people were thinking when they interacted with the candidates when they came to town. So that'll be some details that we need to work out. Honestly, a lot of that's done with myself, board president, clerk, and then just running those things by you just to give a thumbs up, thumbs down, if that makes sense for the board. A key piece of that schedule process is determining who's going to take this person and kind of chaperone them through your community and through the school district. And I'm not trying to put Mr. Dorothy on the spot, but in a case where the outgoing superintendent is in good standing with the district, a lot of times that superintendent will take the person around to the schools and just hand them off to the building principal, for the building principal to take them around for the building tour. You may want to have somebody from the community that's a great ambassador for your community, take them around town to kind of show them the high points of your community, the college, downtown, different areas within your community. So you'll kind of want to put some thought to. A lot of times that'll end up being like a chamber person or the mayor, or if there's a retired board member that has some connections in your community, those are all great resources of somebody that can do that tour of the community. So those are some details that we'll need to work through. And again, I'm there as a resource. If you have questions on how other districts have done this, please don't hesitate to reach out, and I'll be happy to share what we've seen work in those situations. So questions at this point?
A couple of things that I'd say. One, Paul, help me remember, did Cindy come to her initial interview, or did she come at a more advanced stage?
Well, she was only one day.
So that's what, I think she came when you had your big interview. And I know she came because I was her kind of tour guide around the community. I wondered if that's typical or encouraged or discouraged.
I'll be honest with you, in the last several years, we've kind of gone away from saying, hey, bring your significant other, bring your guests. If they want to, they can. But shouldn't be expected. And the rationale behind that is, unfortunately, there's people that will view somebody as a lesser candidate if they don't have a significant other. And so we've really tried to discourage that, just because it could put somebody on unequal footing with others if they don't have a significant other. So we've really tried to discourage that over the last few years because there were some concerns raised over the last several years of, well, how is that a fair measure of the superintendent candidate if they're a spouse, if they have a spouse or don't have a spouse, or have a significant other or don't have a significant other. So we tried to kind of shy away from even putting that out there. And if you pull out our old manual from a few years ago, it used to have a whole section in on how to entertain the guest of the superintendent. We've just taken that out of there because we think it sends the wrong message on that's expected, and that really shouldn't be a disqualifying factor for the individual.
My other question, these are two proposed schedules that I'm.
They're just proposed. You can.
One includes dinner and one does not.
Right.
I just want to offer boys where I thought that was a nice part of our procedure. It's nice to have a little. You can't say you're still on edge while you're interviewing different people, but it is nice to have a little more relaxed.
Yep. 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 All good feedback. Thank you. Yeah, you guys will want dinner too, because it's a long stretch getting through all of those interviews. That's for sure. Just to make sure that everybody's calendars are in sync with one another. Last time we met, we had talked about these are the 4 dates to pencil in on your calendar: December 15th, 16th, the 20th, and the 21st. When we talked last time, I reminded you it's always easier to drop one than try to cram one in there. It's really up to you as a board to decide how you want to do your final deliberations on talking about who you're going to go with from the candidate standpoint. We have some boards that finish the last interview and immediately go right back into an executive session and want to talk about that. Have other boards that sleep on it and they'll do a special meeting the next morning and try to work through that. The key is to keep it moving. It's a crazy year with superintendent searches. You're going to want to keep this thing moving forward. You guys are really early in the process, but you don't want to drag that thing out too long because people start to wonder, am I in consideration? And we've actually had some candidates where a board just kind of drug their feet. This was a few years ago, drug their feet, and their top candidate withdrew because they assumed they obviously weren't the pick, and they felt like it saved face for them to withdraw versus being rejected. So that's kind of my story with boards, is just keep moving on those. I know it's a grind. I know you get worn down at the end of that, but you have to get through those things and work through that. And when you get down to that final deliberation, we encourage you to choose number 1 and number 2. Just in the event that if number 1 doesn't work out, the board doesn't have to come back together and rehash the whole conversation. You already know who option 2 is, and you really need to have agreement as a board. This is A and this is B. That'll help in the event. We hope it won't happen that way, but in the event that something like that would, you can immediately flip to your second option. If that happens. Right. So I come back and meet with you guys on the 13th. In that meeting, we'll spend about 45 minutes to an hour talking about candidates. And then I'll spend about another 15 or 20 minutes or so talking about interview process, procedure, make sure we're all comfortable with that, make sure we're not violating any laws, and trying to make sure that we're doing things appropriately.
So our regular meeting, this is a question I have, is on the 20th. Our regular meeting is the 20th. Okay. So we would have a special meeting on the 13th?
Yes, that's what we had talked about.
Okay. That's right. Okay, so
because that's a heavy lift that night, because you'll spend at least an hour and 15 with me, and then you all will want to deliberate about the candidates and what you feel, and then you'll make your call that night to set up interviews with the candidates. So it would be pretty heavy to tag that onto a regularly scheduled board.
Agreed. So really our calendars would be 13, 15, 16. But the 20th is our regular board meeting, so that would not be an interview night.
It could, yeah, probably not if it's a regularly scheduled meeting. So that might be the night if you only interview 3, you drop off your schedule because you're already going to be here. So the 21st would be another interview night. So if the 20th is already a regular scheduled board meeting, probably is not going to work for interviews. Is what
right, unless we do unless we do a different interview schedule, we'll go under the board's attention. If we do, you know, a 3:30 to something schedule with the interview part, I don't know, but every day has to be the same for every candidate. So if we go with either of these, for example.
Kelly, can I interrupt for a
Yeah.
second? We did talk about that. Now that you just said that, we had talked about possibly flipping their reception till after their interview, doing their interview during the reception time, so you would do the interview technically before your board meeting. I remember that conversation.
So in that case, it's different, but I just want everybody to have a chance, because not everyone was on the Zoom call, so I just want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to weigh in, so that once we decide it makes sense with the other things that we have on our schedule. So just give everybody a couple minutes to kind of think about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, you triggered my thinking there when you said that, so.
I don't know, I'm a little reluctant to do a lot of very energy.
Then you'll be adding an extra day.
If we do 4.
15th and 16th are 2 days. If we would not do anything on the 20th, if we have 3 candidates, it would be on the 21st, that gives you 3.
Yeah.
That's how you count.
I already had 21.
Right.
So 15, 16, 21.
Mhm. Correct, I got you.
Do we need to have a scheduled meeting or shortly after that to come to conclusion?
You can do it that night of the 21st if you want to stay and deliberate after the interviews, or you would need to schedule a special meeting to deliberate and come up with your picks, A and B. And that can be done via Zoom. I mean, you're not interviewing candidates, so you would have a little more flexibility to have that meeting.
I prefer more juice than more days, but I don't know how to figure out this, to be honest.
Yeah, your day is late afternoon there. Yep. Yeah, you're not, your time is all evening time, basically, meeting the candidate, having dinner, going into the interview. That's the schedule that you choose to use. Yep.
We're not meeting the resident potential on the 13th.
So the 13th will be a special meeting for him to go over, so we can narrow down.
Right.
3 candidates, say, and then those interviews will take place on the 15th, the 16th. And if we're not going to do the 20th, then it would be the 21st. And we either grind it out on the 21st, or we say, on the 2nd. What do you guys think? So I can make all that.
I was gonna say, grind it out as
Okay.
And then I guess, is it acceptable to proceed like this, and then if we get down to this process, we have to absolutely interview forward, and after we address the heading of it somewhere.
Well, we would have to do the 20th, which is the meeting.
That's a problem. I don't want to dictate the format of these because we have a meeting. You know what I mean? I don't want to say we can't do it, but we might have a force and then follow.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
On the 13th, do you have the time? So I can go ahead and get that schedule or.
There's a reason we didn't have, I'm sorry.
Do regular times for concern. Basketball game at 5:30, but I don't know if that's gonna work around it.
You said regular time, that's a Zoom meeting on the 13th? Or is that regular meeting together here? That's the one you're gonna talk to us about, like special meeting.
That's the candidate discussion. It's all executive session.
Okay.
So
Do you do Zoom?
I typically do it in person just because I'll have a profile for each candidate. So you'll have a packet that has a resume, has information about every candidate. I mean, we could probably do it Zoom, but it's going to be a lot better discussion if we're sitting around the table having a conversation.
Well, the 13th is an OR day for me, so it would be hard for me to do anything probably before about 5 on the 13th.
So 6:30 on the 13th. And then the 15th and 7th, or sorry, 15th, 16th, and 21st is the interview schedule that with the flip of the interview more at 3 o'clock, just flipping it. Like we talked about. Schedule 1 is flipped. Like we talked about at the meeting. For the actual interviews. For the 15th, 16th, and 21st.
You need a clarification on the.
I don't need that detail. That's you guys to decide that, honestly. Yep. Yeah. You guys can hash that out, and honestly, that's just it's not even a public action item. It's just a schedule that's going to be used. So you'd be fine. Just.
Anybody else have any questions? Anything else we need to know for now?
I'll send these characteristics and qualities tomorrow, and then you'll need to start working on that interview framework. Email me, call me if you all have any questions between now and then. Your position has generated a lot of interest, which is good. We knew it would. I mean, you guys are a good district, great location, so that's a very, very positive thing for you. So. I hesitate to publicly talk about applicants who's actually applied, but I've had a lot of interest in the job. Yep.
And we'll meet our top 5 interview questions. We'll send that, but let's get that.
Yeah, send it to Megan, and then we'll coordinate on getting it cleaned up and back to the board for that 13th. All right.
Thank you so much.
You bet. You all have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you. Thank you for being here all day.
Yeah.
Congrats on your new position.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, that happened pretty darn quick, but yeah, I'm excited about it.
I just want to say that before we got away,
Yeah.
Brian is moved to the new position of KUSP. He handled the executive director.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to hear that. And I was like, I saw him with some guy today. He said, this is Friday. And he says, oh, he just took a new position.
Yeah.
What?
Well, we kind of kept it, well, we sent it to boards on Friday, and then it went public today. So, yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's exciting. Yeah.
All right, that takes care of all of our administrative reports. Moving on now to old business. At our special meeting in November, we talked about visitor policy stuff. We said we would circle back to this at our regular November meeting. We went to, I think it was proposal B, I think, for the primary center, which involved a system of 5, I believe up to 5 visitors to walk kids to the class. Bringing that back, I would like to hear discussion on where board members are at. I know where I'm at, but I want to make sure we go down the line to see if we want to continue with that or if we want to make any changes to that visitor policy.
How's it been working for you at the primary center with the Plan B option of people walking kids to class with passes?
Yeah, it's worked well.
Okay. So no major issues or anything like that? What are your thoughts? Do you want to keep what you're doing? I mean, what is your desire? Keep what you're doing or to go back to being kind of more open even than you are now?
I guess if we're talking about open, like
Well, I mean, just like, so, like, again, kind of like, just kind of how the rest of the schools are with their visitor policies kind of gone back to normal, correct me if I'm wrong, but all of the other schools are back to kind of their previous normal, visitor policy. So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on that. Do you want to keep it as it is, or are you okay with going back, or do you want to make it more restrictive?
I don't think it should be more restrictive. I think everyone, for the most part, on staff is really comfortable with what we're doing right now. The Parents walk their kids in, and most don't stay. Most just walk them to where they wait in the hall, and then they leave. You know, I'm not sure what the visitor policy means at the other school. That means anytime, anyone, all day, anywhere.
I guess maybe I should clarify that, say revert back to your standard visiting policy that you've had in years previous, as opposed to, you know, what.
If it continues as successfully as the last 2 weeks, week and a half, and yeah, we'll go back to what we did have, which was parents are welcome to visit, they just need to make arrangements with the classroom teacher.
Yeah.
In the morning, when they come in, I think everybody's preference still is, you know, this is not a time for parent-teacher conference.
Right. Well, that's appropriate even outside of the setting of COVID, because that's your guys need to get your day started and get on with life. I mean, get on with the school day. So
I would like to give parents who want to volunteer on the site works the opportunity to be in alliance with our teachers who I think are fried and could use the help. So I would like us to see us go back to our visitor policy. And if there is instances of bad behavior, we have a current policy that addresses that says you can't be here. And I would like to see us follow what our policies are. If there's something, I mean, our teachers deserve to be treated with respect. We all deserve to be treated with respect and kindness, and particularly that should be modeled for our students. We know that isn't always the case. We know that there have been some poor examples of that, and when there are, we have a policy about that. That's very, very clear. You don't get to be here if you're, I mean, we have a policy about bullying, harassment, discrimination, all of that, and certainly assault. So I would like to see us go back to our regular visitor policy so that we can have the parents who truly want to help and be in alliance with our teachers to be a resource for them, and to get those relationships where I know we all want them to be. And if it doesn't work, we can reevaluate that. That's my personal position that I wanted to, after, you know, having sat on it since the last meeting, but I wanted to see if anybody else had thoughts before we make a motion one way or the other.
The other extra info I have is that multiple parents have reached out to me and said how much they appreciated being able to walk their child back to school. And some of those parents had never walked their kid back to school since they've had their kids in elementary building. So it has been a really meaningful opportunity for them to see their teacher, you know, even 2 or 3 times since they dropped their daughter off at first grade or whatever. So it has really been impacted by that. Has been the most frequently reached out issue in the last 2 weeks for me. But so I know it's been awesome.
Well, from a district-wide standpoint, I like the congruency of that all of our buildings are, you know, kind of doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and move that we return the visitor policy as it was before. I guess it's the simplest way to say it.
I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Raise your right hand. Anyone opposed?
Oh, trying to speak. I just wanted to clarify that this will be like teachers will set that up if that's their need, and it won't be imposed on them as far as volunteers.
Of course not. Yeah. The previous policy wasn't imposed upon them.
Yeah, and so teachers are wanting to have volunteers in the classroom too.
Am I getting that?
Some teachers do.
Some teachers, okay, very good. Okay.
We actually have parent volunteering now. That's great.
All right. So was that a vote in favor or a vote in? Okay, I just want to make sure. All right, so motion carries 6-0. New business, board member resignation. We received a resignation letter from Carrie Stevens, and we need to officially accept that resignation letter. Is that something that we have to read? Is that a public thing that we have to read? I didn't think so.
Letter, just that you're accepting the resignation. That's what's submitted.
Okay, and that does require a motion to receive that, or to accept that resignation. Once we do that, then we can talk about what the process will be for appointing a new board member. So would anyone like to?
I'll do it. I motion that we accept Carrie Stevens' resignation from this board.
All right, Phil has moved and Tony has seconded that we accept the resignation letter of Carrie Stevens with thanks for her service. All those in favor, please say aye. Raise your right hand. Aye. All right, motion carries 6-0. Okay, so the second part to that is we need to talk about the appointment process. Mr. Dorothy, could you speak with us about how that works?
Okay, so this is dealt with in state statute, so there are some rules here. There's a lot of open part of this, but there's also some very specific statute language. First of all, the board has to, you'll have to pass a motion here to officially open the position, that there are to publicly publish that there is a vacancy on the board. And that then has to go into at least the Lawrence Journal World, our main legal notification. I believe we'll put it in other places too. And then the statute says you have to wait after that publication. You have to wait at least 15 days before you could appoint somebody else. It does not say how long you wait. Some boards go very rapidly. Some boards take months before they decide to refill the position. There's no regulation on that end of it. The only thing is, the longer you go, the more you risk the opportunity of having a 3-3 tie on some issue, and you can't settle it then. So, would that necessarily happen? No, not necessarily, but you still have to have 4 votes to pass anything. So even though there's 6 board members, you still have to have 4 yeses in order to pass something. So, so with that, couple things. When you get down to the decision, this is for elected personnel, is what they say, not non-elected personnel. By law, you can go into executive session for non-elected personnel. You cannot go into executive session for elected personnel. So this can be a very awkward process, and it all has to happen in an open session. So in order to help with that, because it tends to be, you get 3 or 4 candidates sitting out there all looking at you, trying to decide, okay, who are we picking, one over another? And so it can be kind of awkward. So what I would suggest is having an application that would provide you information from each candidate that you would like to know that would help you make it an easier decision. It's still a bit awkward, but you then can sit here. That doesn't mean all of you agree on what the piece is that you think is most important. But I think having them fill out, we have not done that in the past. Generally, what we've done in the past is have them fill out a letter. I think, Phil, you just wrote a letter saying, here's why I'd like to be on the board and so on. Well, each person writes their own letter, and it doesn't necessarily provide the information that each of you would like to hear. So I sent you a template, and that's all it is. I put something together as a suggestion. And if there are pieces that you would like, if they're part of that, we don't need that. Or if there's questions that you think should be in there that you would like to know in order to help you make your decision, put that in there. And then you have them fill this out. They have it in by, say, noon the day of or the Friday before. They have it in, and then that gives you the weekend to look over those applications. And then you walk in Monday with a little more background and information than just showing up cold with people sitting out there and you're trying to make that decision. You can ask questions of the people sitting there. That becomes a bit of a awkward, because as soon as you ask the first one what their question is, and you guys go, oh, okay, then everybody else goes, okay, well, that's how I answer that then, because they're all sitting right there to do it. So, so it's a bit awkward on all of that. So, one, are you interested in an application kind of thing? So you're getting similar information from everybody. Okay. What were you good with the questions that were on there? Were any on there that you said, Paul, we don't need that information to make a decision? Yep. And so tell them, Kelly.
Oh, sorry. So I asked to list or to share previous volunteer experience with the district. So previous examples of service in the district, aside from running for school board. I want to know, that wasn't on there. It described it in other ways, but how have you been involved in the district prior to this? That was something I was looking for.
Other questions board members can think of that they'd like to have? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, with the application, are we required to ask them questions at the meeting?
No.
So,
I'd still, I think that there should still be like a statement.
do a statement.
Yeah.
I'm not really interested in a gotcha scenario.
Right.
I don't want it to be about that. But you also have to be used to being in front of people.
Right.
Like that's kind of part of it. For better or for worse. Okay, I was just curious about that part. So I guess the other thing we need to decide is timeline.
So, yeah, so here's the thing, you could try and do this by December board meeting. You would have the time, 15 days. You have a lot of other things on your plate right now that you're trying to get taken care of. And yes, it would be good to have, because if you get into these candidates and 3 of you want one and 3 of you want the other, you've got a problem. So, but I'm just thinking how quickly you have to do this. Again, you have nothing more than you have to wait more than 15 days after it's advertised. How far you go out and when you decide you want to do that's up to you guys.
So, following this timeline, right? We could, in theory, appoint somebody at the December 13th meeting where Brian's going to come back, provide all that candidate information for us. And they'd be immediately pulled in there to begin that conversation. I'm just thinking time-wise, that could happen. Otherwise, we can't get them in there for that first conversation. I don't know that it's going to be beneficial to bring them in, you know, on the 20th. Right. I mean, so it may, it's just my thinking on this one, we may as well punt it to January in that respect. If we can't get by the 13th, it's fine. Because my thought. But that's just so. I don't like any of this time on that word. As long as this is a really complicated time to be jumping.
Yes.
I like that idea. I feel like it conflates things on the 13th if we're trying to do the first, wrap our minds around the processes things a little more clean if we are not conflating two different.
I would think we're waiting until January, well, I don't know how you felt, Bill, but I was pretty overwhelmed when I first.
Yeah, I can't imagine drinking from the fire hose that this will be.
So,
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's fair to a new board member to throw in the cauldron and okay, now we're gonna hire somebody.
Very good point.
I don't think it's fair to put everything halfway, so.
So to that, having gone through superintendent search previously, for you, I mean, I don't know this answer. And how likely is it we're going to get in a situation where we're stuck at 3-3? It's a hard question.
Anything is possible. I've hired a superintendent and a special product director. And there has never been a real schism that, you know, there has been some, look, you're the only one out there on the island, can you join us kind of discussion, but there has not been
two camps.
How, yeah, I have not experienced that. I'm not saying it's impossible.
Yeah.
Or if it is, we just hurry up and get a new board member.
It'll be 3-3 on one vote. It's up the streets.
No pressure.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about January then? Okay.
Thanks. One other clarifying question too. I know how our school district is carved into 3 different districts for the regional area distribution there. Does this replacement person have to reside in the same?
She's at large.
She's at large.
Oh, she's at large.
Yes, this is,
okay.
you've got the best.
Yeah.
The best option. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because since she's in the at-large position, it wasn't the at-large position. Nobody in the district can apply.
Okay, that's great.
If it had been someone representing one of the districts, that's where it gets tough, because then they actually have to reside in that district to apply, or they can't apply.
So if we do the January meeting, which that one is actually on a Tuesday, right? Isn't that the one that we have on? Yeah. That one is on the 18th. Yeah, it's on Tuesday, the 18th, because of MLK. Okay, so if we do it on the 18th, then can we say the application for consideration is due by the 14th, which is the Friday before, and that gives everyone the weekend to review the materials that are submitted? Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have our plan there. So we also, we need to have an official motion to publish the vacancy then, right, for the record.
Look at that, then say that that's the way to get published, is that we're going to have an application like process that's turning the due date of the 14th, and then we meet 18th the meeting.
Right.
Okay, I motion to do that.
Okay.
I was waiting for Kelly to make a motion.
So, yeah,
No, I said it and he just said so moved.
Yeah, so moved.
Oh, well, excuse me.
No, let's get it now.
Yeah, so I
Let's
just
get
said
it now.
that we make a motion that we publish for the replacement board member appointment to happen on the 18th with
Of January 2022.
January 18th, yep, 2022, with application due to be completed no later than the 14th of January.
Time enough for.
Yeah, 3 o'clock or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah, we want to have time.
So let's say noon on, Phil, is it okay in your motion?
I'm sorry.
Is it okay in the motion to have noon on Friday, January 14th? Okay,
Okay, let's do that.
okay. So that's the motion. And Chris has seconded that we publish for the vacancy of Carrie Stevens to appoint a new board member on January the 18th, 2022, whereby the application materials for any interested candidates are due on noon on Friday, the January 14th.
Basically what I said.
It's, yes, it is. All right. Bill moved and Chris seconded. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand.
All right.
Motion carries 6-0. All right, vacation leave carryover.
Each year the district allows employees that have vacation leave and the ability to carry over. It ends October 31st. Okay, October 31st. So I've got to use up what I have. I get my new days on July 1st, but I've always been allowed to carry over 5 days into the next year. If I didn't get them all used up, I could do that. But this year we had talked about allowing them to have 10 days because we have quite a few of the vacation people just haven't been able to get them all in. So they were asking if they could have 10 days. So I'm asking tonight if the board would approve for the 21-22 school year to allow 10 days of vacation to be carried over for the next year.
All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. Motion carries 6-0. Co-op report.
I think the only update for you guys is that recently, for the co-op, I think the two major things I can think of at this moment are we still need parents. We've made quite a few, especially from parents here in Baldwin, which is much appreciated. And they're working sometimes 4 to 6 hour shifts, which is an excellent reason family too. The other thing that is going to be coming up is our strategic planning process, but we're doing 3 Bush as well. We are finalizing this survey that's going to go out to the 3 communities that we serve. We're having some details added in there, like are they a co-op employee, are they a parent, or kind of some options they can check out. So we can get some differentiation between how the communities feel about the co-op partnership as well. So those surveys will probably be going out sometime in December, possibly January at the latest, but we're in the final stages of getting those sent out. Besides that, Susan, questions?
Thank you. Miscellaneous. Does anyone have miscellaneous? I have a couple things, but I'm going to give you guys a little first. Okay. Speaking of surveys, just so that there's transparency with the rest of the community, we are talking about our own strategic, we have been talking about our own strategic planning process, and we hit the pause button on that until January as well because of our aggressive timeline with trying to, I think there are 34 superintendent openings in the state of Kansas, if I did my research right, and we're trying to beat the rush. And because of that, we are still doing our strategic plan, but we wanted to front load our attentions and our energies to giving our best and our most to the superintendent search process. So we will resume strategic planning in January, as well as ESER 3 survey gathering stuff. There's also the downtown city of Baldwin is also doing, I mean, everyone is in survey mode, and so we're trying to be mindful of getting good feedback, but also navigating survey fatigue. So that's why we've kind of adjusted some of those timelines. District Site Council will meet tomorrow in the junior high library at 6. And the other miscellaneous item, we've had some emails come to us about mental health and Thanksgiving break. And I know those have been forwarded to you or have come to you from admins. So I don't know if anyone is wanting to talk about that, but it didn't come, the timing of that came in after our agenda was created. And so since that was a request that kind of came from a few different areas, I did at least want to bring that forward for board to discuss if they would like. Sorry, the precedent of that, if everyone didn't see the emails, was there are some districts that are giving that Monday and Tuesday off kind of in recognition of some of the burnout. I mean, there's a lot of the buildings have been bare bones, as you've heard mentioned several times. Substitutes are limited. There are behavioral challenges with kids who are still relearning how to do school full-time. And so there are some districts that have chosen to do that. And so that request was made of us. We would have to account for that in our calendar. But I just wanted to bring it forward because it slipped in between the time of agenda publication and that.
I like the idea, I'm not sure what our options are. We breaking down, it's not on the agenda as far as
I'm conflicted. From a selfish standpoint, I really would love to have my kids home during that time. I'm not working on Monday and Tuesday, I don't think. So from a selfish standpoint, I'd like to see them come home. It bothers me a little bit because we're talking about all this loss, and I don't know, a week off starts to seem like that's going to be a big time to be away. So I'm conflicted. I think I could probably go either way. You know, well, if we decided to say let's take that Monday and Tuesday off, where do we regain those days, or do we have to regain those days?
Okay, each year we have that minimum number of hours, 1,116 hours that we have to meet every year. We are over that by the ways, but that is what we use for snow days to make sure we stay. So we can use a few snow days. We don't really make anybody make them up so that we stay up at the 1,116. If we ever got to the 1,116 one below, we would have to make up some time. That's usually been minutes in the district. We had some minutes to the day, and then that gets us to the 1,116 hours. So is there room and not have to make it up? Yes, you could do that, but it does shorten the amount of you're kind of gambling with the snow this winter that we don't have a lot of snow days, or we have a few, we'd still be above. If we took these two out and we had several snow days, I guess sometime in the spring, you would have to come back together and say, okay, we're going to add some, 5 minutes each day for the remainder of the year in order to make sure we get this made up. So,
I'm very comfortable with saying let's give the extra 2 days. I think that's worth doing. And understanding that there is a little bit of throw of the dice that potentially could then lead to longer days in the future or additional days in the end. But, I can completely understand the burnout that's going on. I'm trying to remember back to my school days, but I feel like a lot of times those were kind of lost days anyway, because you're like, oh, I'm here for a day, and then you're 2 days, and now I'm gone. So, from an educational standpoint, I think that you're probably going to get more benefit, give some time off, mental health stuff.
What are the surroundings?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think they can watch movies anymore.
At least one of the surrounding districts around us, it's not because of burnout, though. They've had that scheduled for years. So this is just business as usual for them. They have had Thanksgiving off for years and years and years. So that, at least one of them anyways, that comparison is just how they've always done business. I'm certainly willing to talk about a holiday during that week in the calendar. Don't we have to? Isn't that a membership event? Calendar? We're not adding.
Not the calendar, as long as you're not adding to the calendar.
Always a mistake.
Well, yes, that's true.
Okay. Let's have a conversation about unintended consequences.
So one thing I do want to add, I'm not against the board doing that. I get why school districts are doing that. The other side is, for some parents, you're a week out here, and some parents are going to say, okay, now I've got to figure out daycare for my kids for 2 days when I was going to be home on Thursday and Friday. So I only had to figure out 1 day. So the daycare part of it will be a challenge for some families.
Yeah, that was the first thing for as well, that like, for instance, I'm out of town Monday and Tuesday next week. So my wife, that fall, my wife to watch the 3 kids. That's a very common concern for parents, that they're going to scramble for some coverage in the week where they probably have to piece together coverage already at this point for the holidays in general. So, especially for those, pre-K through, 4th, 5th grade, which kids we can, it would be on the low. Well, I guess they could.
And I'd also like to offer the, I guess, not making your, I guess I want to make sure we don't make the assumption that it's wasted days, because I think there's a lot of teachers that really count on those days to continue to learn.
I'm conflicted as well. From the fatigue standpoint, it's not that I don't want to give it, but I'm concerned about unintended consequences. Even with food security issues. I mean, we have many students who depend on the free meals every day of the week, and normally when we have breaks coming up, our food services director plans for that with take-home stuff. There's no way to plan for that at this short notice to be able to send extra food home. I mean, that's not our particular situation, but I'm trying to think of just unintended negative consequences. I don't know. I really feel good about it.
I think it's always, I think your safest bet is always to kind of stay with the status quo. I mean, I think that I think to keep it as it is probably the safest and least disruptive with those unintended consequences. But is it something that though we should be thinking about in the future? If that's kind of the way, like, should we be thinking about, okay, for next year, let's do a week?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree. If you want to think about it, let's think about it. Right? Set a calendar where we take the entire week of Thanksgiving off. I've got serious issues with changing the calendar midstream. So a week before this event is supposed to occur, right? Parents look at the calendar, they count on it, right? And it is nice if you have the luxury of being home, being able to see your kids all day long, but that is not universal. And so, while I think this would be great to take the entire week off, I'm not conflicted at all. I think this is a bad idea to change the calendar and to say to parents around the district, oh, yeah, by the way, now we're not coming to school all next week, right? Let's stick with the calendar as it is. If we want to have this discussion next year when we're looking at the calendar, I think that's the great time to have that discussion.
Other thoughts? Is everyone comfortable with that, with calendar thoughtfulness for next year?
Is there something we can do without changing the calendar to facilitate some kind of mental health thing? Make it mental, can we make those a day of that, like a mental stand down, kind of a mental health day kind of thing at school, as opposed to like being at home? I mean, if the issue really is burnout with being, having all of the stress and trying to make up all this time, is there something we can do? And like Danny's, can you make it a movie? I mean, I don't know, not something like that, but just something along those lines where you can make it something different instead of just sending kids home from school.
I think it's a great idea, Mr. Harvey, but I also I don't like it when people look over my shoulder while I'm doing my job.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I'm not sure if I want to do that to teachers. I think we want to trust their professionalism, and they realize they know their kids better than we do.
I mean, to give them the freedom to do that, maybe not the force, because I'm sure that there's a hierarchical standing, that they have to do this kind of stuff at this day. Can you put something in place to give them the freedom to do something outside of their normal day that's a little bit more kind of just.
Well, I'm guessing that our teachers are using their professional judgment to do that at the appropriate level, right? That's going to vary depending on whether you're teaching second grade or whether you're teaching 11th graders. So they get it. It's a holiday week, right? And so I think it's human nature for us to sort of say, let's take it easy for these 2 days because we're going to a Thanksgiving holiday. And so I say let's trust the teachers to do that. I don't think they need us to sort of say, all right, take it easy on the kids because we know they're stressed out. I think that they understand.
Yeah.
I think what Dr. Harvey is saying is that if there is support for like, it's not about telling anybody how to do their job. I think there's a misunderstanding of the sentiment here, the way I'm hearing it at least. I think it's what I hear a lot from teachers is, yes, they are, and families, is that yes, they are stressed out. But when you hear that verbalized support for doing what you need to do to take care of yourself, it's not that you need it in a condescending way. It's in a, I think what I was hearing from you is like a statement of support, not a mandate of what that has to look like in your classroom, but a breather kind of day.
Some freedom to do what you want.
Right.
Anything outside of normal.
You know, and then how that manifests in your classroom, of course, is how it manifests in your classroom. Principals, what do you think? I mean, I'm hearing in all your reports, you all say, every single one of you, board members are reading your reports. What your reports are saying is that your staff are tired, they're exhausted, they are at their wits' end, et cetera, et cetera. So I think what we're looking for, we don't want to do something that's disruptive. I think what we are really trying to in earnest is be responsive to something that every single one of you has sent in your board updates. How can we help with that? I think is in a way that doesn't jack the calendar and throw people into chaos. I mean, that's not what we're trying to do either. What do you guys think?
What about looking at December 21st?
To give more time.
That's a Monday, Tuesday, we have school. Okay. Second semester finals, for instance?
Yes.
Okay.
It doesn't mess with our phones.
The high school would have to know way ahead of time.
Yeah.
To, you know,
My own
to
personal opinion, if we're not going to do 2 days next week, looking something second semester. I know we have spring break, maybe entertain the idea of a couple Fridays off where there's 4-day work weeks. I think that's a pretty good alternative.
Okay.
Because if you do nothing, that's going to speak volumes. It just is.
Yep.
And I don't think that's to be negative. That's the reality right now. Obviously, I shared things out with you today because for whatever reason, I think Dr. Harvey, I quoted you probably half a dozen times the past week, because if I knew this year was going to be worse than last year, then maybe I wouldn't have done it or been an advocate for some of the things that we did. The reality is, here we are. On the plus side, it's not really a plus. It's not as if everybody else in the state is immune to everything else that's going on. It doesn't matter what model you chose last year, everybody's having the same issue. And that's because we go to the meetings and we speak with other administrators. And when I see the Zoom and these meetings, there are other administrators that are flat out defeated. And there are many women and men that are way sharper than I am, and they just are flat out defeated. It's a grind. I mean, overall, I don't know if the other administrators are, in terms of we're talking teacher retention, I'm concerned. I've already had people say flat out, if I knew I could do something else, I would be doing something else. And so then we have to say, well, what do you need from us? You know, there's like, nothing right now. So I don't know.
Well, people just need support. Everybody's dealing with it. And I think that's, I want to give Derek and Dan a chance to weigh in on, how can we be supportive in a way that doesn't actually cause problems?
I think this conversation right now is a huge piece of it, honestly. I hope our teachers here, that our board is having this conversation, looking at it, because I really can't understand that about that. That's a big piece of it. I like the idea of maybe doing a couple of days the second semester. Next week's tough too, especially the points we brought out about kids not being able to get for meals. We see a lot of that. That is a big concern. I was thinking about that in my board update when I was writing that. Second semester has, I believe, just 1 or 2 days. I was asking Helen, it's a couple of days longer.
2.5.
2.5. So maybe doing a couple of Fridays, second semester, may make a lot of sense. But I don't know if that necessarily addresses the immediate need of this one. Also,
yeah, the idea for next week was to solve an immediate need that was having. So I think if we try to say next week to be a unique and different thing, that's not necessarily going to solve the problem, because our students need to have the routines. Part of the issue we're having is not having routines and staff, sort of classified staff would have 2 days next week without pay. Classified staff. You might be helping in one area and making it financial.
Right.
I like the idea that the summer, that's a possibility. And then maybe asking our teachers for specifics that I don't have an answer for them right now. What is it that you need other than that?
Well, that second semester will give you an opportunity to say, oh, we didn't use these 3 snow days, let's do these 3 Fridays. So I'll give you a little bit more freedom without as much gambling and you have time.
Can A team take a look at that, if, as the board's okay with that? I mean, we do want to be responsive, but we also don't want to upset the apple cart and create these unintended consequences. When our heart is in the right place, sometimes if you are too reactive, it can cause more problems than you actually intend to solve. So I do want our staff and our families and kiddos to know that we're listening and we care about all those things, and we understand that a compromised brain is not a learning brain, and we get that. I think we should not do Thanksgiving and look more forward on how we can do something different. Is everyone okay with that? I know Tony is. Is everybody else okay? I know I'm like bummed about it, but I'm like, I think
I think you're right. It creates too many issues. Lots more issues than it solves. And I want to give people relief and time with their families, and I'm not sure it's going to play out as ideally as we're making in our head right now.
Yeah.
For a lot of folks.
Okay, well, if A team could take a look at that, of how it would be meaningful, like meaningful support, not just check the box support. We're not interested in that. We want to do something that actually helps. Okay. Does anyone else have anything else for miscellaneous?
Oh.
Yes, sir.
I'll just be brief about this. Last 2 weeks ago, we went to the KASD conference.
Oh, yeah.
Is it 2 weeks ago? I think it was. Okay. Anyway, I just wanted to share that Susan and I had a chance to go up there, collaborate and network with additional superintendents and board members, and actually, like Brent was saying as well, like we're all in this journey together, whether they're in Plainville or they're in Baldwin. I mean, it's a lot of struggle out there right now, and it was very helpful to have those conversations with those folks and get ideas about, things from bond issues for building football stadiums to restructuring the contract language to be more flexible for mental health days, and just a lot of those kind of unique conversations that have been very scarce the last couple of years. It's very nice to have those with fellow board members as well as superintendents. And I don't know what kind of offerings KSP has coming up next 6 months or so, but it really kind of reinvigorated my thought of attending those more regularly, because they are so beneficial, and I miss those opportunities to learn from district on the block and how they're doing things different, that we can bring some of those ideas over here as well. So, Susan, did you have any big takeaways from that?
It was very beneficial, very, thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity to go every time, and especially when it's close, just right down the road. And hearing about like the legislative updates and that piece of it, just kind of what's going on across the state. Which, yeah.
That reminded me, it's going to be an active legislative session, so be aware, start making phone calls immediately about advocating for public education funding and not creation. Not a lot of soapbox about that right now, but we're going to have to be much more active. I feel like a lot of things slid by last year at the legislature because we were all, in triage mode. We're still in triage mode, but we're not going to be more mindful that happened last year. So. Oh, and by the way, Susan's really good at going to those demo fairs and grabbing squishy things for my kids. So thank you, Susan.
I got some good swag.
I get some good stuff. Good stuff.
Thank you for attending and representing our district at that. You guys, I appreciate it. Superintendent's report. We have nothing this evening. Do we have any final executive session matters? I don't believe so. Just checking. Okay. So we have the personnel report to approve.
move that we approve the personnel report. Second.
All right, all those in favor of approving the personnel report as presented with many thanks to Dr. Amy Nguyen, please say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. Motion carries 6-0. Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Bill's moved and Susan has seconded. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.